All right, wife. It's a new day. Let's start out with a nice calming chapter 35 titled Steading Sofu. So as the group is trying to get to the steading, Perrin starts asking things like, "Hey, can wolves enter the steading?" And Loyal's like, "Nah, only creatures of the shadow don't want to enter a steading, as well as Aes Sedai, since they can't touch the true source inside a steading. The true source being the one power, right? There's a lot of different names for the power. Um, yeah, and then he also points out Matt is still looking very ill, even though Varen has tried to heal him multiple times. And I always picture Varen like a very I personally I picture her as a very short, stocky lady, that's sort of like a grandma. Like I don't know. I kind of I think I kind of picture her like a fairy godmother type thing, like a very large woman. But I don't know if that's accurate. After the second day of them leaving Karheim, suddenly they're overwashed with a feeling of calm. Rand feels a little refreshed, but realizes he can't touch Sidon. This means they've entered the steading. As they walk further in, they encounter someone that introduces herself as Aerith, and she's an Ogier. And she says, "Hey, all your soldiers cannot come in here. It's unsettling to have armed humans in the steading." And so Ingtar is like, "Okay, that makes, we're guests here. That's fine. I'll come in. Hurin will come in, and Rand in that group." And they're like, "Cool." So they go in, and Loyal starts talking about his involvement with the steading. And he talks about the longing, which I don't know if I talked about this in the first book, but it's a concept that he explains further here. And essentially, he says Ogier are bound to steadings. If they leave the steading for too long, something called the longing causes them to become weak and eventually die if they don't return home. Prior to the breaking of the world 3,000 years ago by the male Aes Sedai, the Ogier could go anywhere they wanted, but after the breaking, Ogier couldn't find their steadings because the world had shifted. The floors of seas had become the tips of entire mountains, so the world is unrecognizable from what it was. And it's during this time, which the Ogier call the exile, that they were first struck by the longing, which is the desire to know their steadings again. And Rand starts panicking a little bit, and not panicking, but he's anxious about it, and he's like, "Loyal's been traveling with us for an awful long while." And Rand asks Loyal, "Are you going to get the longing with how long you've been out?" But Loyal quickly says, "Oh, I'll know when it comes, and I'll be able to go back to the steadings." And he's like, "Besides, living in a steading's very dull compared to traveling with 3 ta'veren." As they're walking and noticing all the different Ogier, and Rand being a little envious of how carefree they seem to be living their lives, at this point, Aerith mentions, "Oh, by the way, we have other humans as guests here right now. 3, in fact." And then they see them, 3 Aiel, maidens of the spear, and Ingtar takes out his sword quickly as if he's afraid that the Aiel will attack. And it seems like that's correct, because as soon as the maidens spot, they pull up the veils on their faces, something that they know Aiel only do when they intend to kill. Rand and Hurin advance with their swords out, Perrin with his axe halfway out of his belt loop. Matt's thinking to himself, "I'm not going to be hurting a woman." And then Varen and Aerith are like trying to stop the maidens by like, "Stop!" And Loyal's like, "Remember the pact! Remember the pact!" But the maidens in our group keep advancing together, and eventually another Ogier, June, comes up and tells them, "Put up your weapons." And he reminds them again of the pact, and the Aiel women seem to shake themselves out of it and uncover their veils and appear to be pretty embarrassed, and they start apologizing to this Ogier, June. As the Aiel walk away, Ingtar's like, I'm surprised they stopped attacking since they veiled themselves. But Aerith's like, oh, the Aiel would not break the pact once they remembered. The Aiel are here anyways, only for the sung wood that the Ogier make. Remember, they sing to the wood to create things, right? And he's like, oh, Stedding Sofu has 2 tree singers, even though they're very rare. I hear Stedding Shengtai has another tree singer who's very young. And Loyal quickly, looks away because Aerith clearly doesn't know that that is him. Once they're shown to a lodging for themselves, Mat and Perrin start talking to Rand about how the Sung Wood's probably an excuse. The maidens are probably looking for he who comes with the dawn, because we met another Aiel, Urien, who said that that is what they were doing, and that might be you, Rand, since you're the only Aiel we know. But Rand's like, I'm not Aiel. Tam is my father. Still holding on to that desire. Ogier women keep coming in, bringing in towels and fruit and wine for them all, and Loyal keeps getting more and more nervous. And Rand's like, why are you as nervous as a cat in a dog yard? And Loyal's like, well, I'm afraid one of these Ogier will want to be my wife. Because in Ogier land, if a girl sees a boy that she likes, she goes to her mother. And if the mother is like, yes, then the girl's mother contacts the male's mother. And the next thing you know, the boy is engaged to be married. The male Ogier don't have any say in those marriage arrangements, and so Loyal gets very nervous. And he knows that if they discover he's left his steading without permission, oh, they'll marry him off real quick, and he won't leave until he has gray in his beard. Mat starts laughing, and he's like, among us, men do the choosing. But then Rand's thinking to it, and he's like, well, actually, that's kind of what happened with me and Egwene. Shit. And then he's like, plus, Mat, your father never did anything your mother wouldn't let him do. And that shuts Mat down immediately. And he just stops laughing and gets embarrassed. Finally, June comes back in, the Ogier from earlier, and says, the elders would like to see you all. And they follow. Chapter 36 is titled Among the Elders. So they try to convince the elders to allow the group to pass through the Stedding Sofu Waygate so that they can get to Toman Head quickly and get to Paden Fane. Alar, one of the oldest of the Ogier elders, says, traveling the ways is dangerous, and she brings out another Ogier who has a vacant look in his eyes and doesn't seem to be doing anything except walk where he's guided. And they say he became brain damaged traveling the ways. It's a very bad place. He's drooling. He can't speak. His expression is vacant. Varen tries to delve into him with the one power and announces to everybody he's empty, devoid of any soul. But the group doesn't see an alternative, and they say they have to go in. But Alar says, all right, if we let you in, you must make us a promise. You must return Loyal safely to Stedding Shengtai. And they're like, okay, eventually we'll do that. And so he's like, all right. Loyal waited outside during this exchange because he was scared of being called out for anything. But when they go back out into where Loyal was waiting, they find he's holding a flower. Turns out Aerith came up and gave one to him. And they all start making wisecracks about which one of them's more popular with the ladies. So the group exits the Stedding after thanking them all for their hospitality and all that jazz. And Rand realizes he can sense Saidin again. Varen opens the Waygate when they arrive, and Rand, as the gate opens, sees Machin Shin is directly behind it, and he yells at her, close it, close it! Varen immediately closes the Waygate again, and Varen is confused. Rand thinks to himself, Machin Shin must be following them. And Varen's like, that's not possible. No one can control Mashin Shin. It can't have followed us here. That doesn't make sense. And it's at this point that Hurin speaks up and says, what if we use a portal stone again? We could catch up to Toman Head since distances were significantly shorter in the other world. Rand, not seeing another option, relents and volunteers to try to find the stone, even though he doesn't want to channel ever again. But he kind of has a silent look with Varen, who starts speaking up as if she understands and says, I believe I can activate the portal stone. And everyone starts believing her as if she'll be the one to do it. But they both know that Varen is not powerful enough to do it on her own. And so off they go to find a nearby portal stone that the Ogier know of. Chapter 37, then, is titled, What Might Be. This is a cool one. As they approach the portal stone, Ingtar starts bringing up, we shouldn't be here. Pain Fane isn't in Toman Head. This is a trap. We should be going to Karheim directly. We'll find the Horn of Valir there, or at least some leads to take us to it. This is foolish going across the continent. But Varen kind of calls him a coward and is like, it's there. And so Ingtar relents. Varen and Rand walk up to the stone with Rand saying, just coming up with a lie. He's like, I'm going to go up there and help Varen since we've traveled with it before, more recently than her. And Varen quickly is like whispering to him, well, you've definitely done it more recently since I've never done it. They look at these different symbols on the portal stone, and she basically narrows it down to two possible symbols that imply Toman Head's portal stone, where they want to go. But they don't know which one to do it for. It's a 50-50 shot. And so Rand picks a symbol with an arrow that looks like it's breaking out of a circle. And the arrow's pointing to the direction that Toman Head is in. And so, without any other way to determine the correct symbol, everyone gathers in, and he channels. And the world flickers, and Rand is at his farmhouse in Eamon's Field. He and Tam are sitting there, and the Trollocs start banging down the doors, and they kill Tam, and they kill Rand. And then Rand is in the Two Rivers, and he has married Egwene, but sometimes he is taken by very foul, black moods. Like in the last few years since he got a fever, he hasn't been quite the same. And they have several children, and Tam is there just loving on his grandsons and granddaughters and giving them treats and making them have the best lives. And it's okay that these people that claim to be descendants of Arthur Hawkwing have taken control of the entire continent and killed and enslaved all the Aes Sedai, because, the Two Rivers are just on their own there. But Egwene is the wisdom of the village now, known for miraculous cures that no other wisdom has ever been able to perform. She couldn't heal Rand from these sicknesses that he keeps getting in his depression, but they live a relatively happy life. And years later, Egwene passes and dies. And Rand develops another sickness and starts wasting away. And then Trollocs from the Blight begin a campaign and start making their way to the south of the continent. And Rand, doing his best, he joins the defending forces as a soldier, even though he's old and he has lost several fingers due to this weird disease that he seems to have. And there's a moment in a battle where he feels completely enraged by the sight of the enemy banner and the forces of darkness. And as he's firing arrows at the army of Trollocs coming at him, a Trolloc runs him through with a spear, and Rand dies. And then Rand thinks to himself, it's a shame that Egwene died mysteriously very, very young, as he sits with Tam in his farmhouse in Emond's Field. But as that thought passes, Tam starts teaching Rand swordplay again, and decides to send Rand to Ilion to see if Rand can work as a soldier. Rand has his money stolen in one town and meets this girl named Min, who he thinks is very cute, but she tells him strange things and about things that are and supposedly what will be, and so he runs away from her and goes to Caemlyn. Rand struggles a little bit, but gets a job in the Queen's Guard, and he gets these weird feelings towards the daughter heir, Elaine, feelings he realizes are very improper coming from a soldier to a queen. But it's during this time that Rand realizes he can channel. He keeps the ability secret, but carefully uses it on the battlefield. Eventually, his battles become victorious enough and he becomes a leader in the guard, but then he gets sick with a wasting disease again. Not again, for the first time. Descendants claiming to be of claiming to be descendants of Arthur Hawkwing invade the continent, and there's a massive battle, and Rand is hurling lightning and fire, and is killed by an errant bolt of lightning that strikes him. Rand goes through many lives. He was a soldier, a shepherd, a beggar, a king, a farmer, a gleeman, a sailor, a carpenter. He was born, lived, and died as an Aiel. He died mad. He died rotting. He died of sickness, accident, old age. 100 lives. More. Hundreds. So many he couldn't count them. And they land with a thud at their destination. At the other portal stone. Everyone is disoriented, and Verin, some people start throwing up everywhere, and Verin surmises they have seen alternate lives, things that could have been. And she looks around. We must have spent 4 months traveling just now, because it looks like it's late fall. Ingtar seems very upset, and starts cradling himself, saying, "Walk in the light and find the horn. I'm going to walk in the light and find the horn." Verin heals him quickly to try to calm him down. Mat looks over at Rand and tells him, "Rand, you know I would never betray you, right?" And Rand wonders to himself, what did Mat see? Perrin says he doesn't feel like they had very many choices. Certain things seem inevitable to happen. And Verin suggests, well, we should keep heading west, because we've arrived in Toman Head. But 4 months later, we've lost months on this journey compared to what it would have taken to walk here by foot. And Rand thinks to himself, I hope we're not too late to stop Paden Fane. Now that is a heck of a chapter to me. Alright, wife. So I went to the gym, so this is a separate recording, and I was really thinking about it, and these chapters are getting, they're a little bit longer than I like. I know last book I was getting to the point where I could do them in like 2-3 minutes per chapter at the end, and I'm taking a lot longer for these, but I was thinking about it, and I hope you understand that the reason I'm doing that is because I love this book so freaking much. I think starting with that last chapter, the one that I just finished on, everything from this point on is what hooked me like 100% on this book. I absolutely adore it. It is just fascinating, the stuff that they do, and that revelation that they lost 4 months traveling like that instead of doing it instantaneously, that blew my mind the first time I read it. I was like, oh my god, like, hope is lost kind of thing, right? Paden Fane now has 4 months on him. So, yeah, I'm taking a little bit longer. Hopefully, honestly, I don't think all the books will be like this. It's certain sections of each book, right? But I just want you to know, like, I love the crap out of this one. So we're going to get into it now. But I wanted to share that because this book is something important to me, right? So, anyway, chapter 38 is titled Practice. So we actually go to Egwene's point of view, who we haven't really seen them since, Egwene, Nynaeve, and Min since they met up, and then Nynaeve pass the accepted test and everything, right? And so they're all sitting in Egwene's quarters in the White Tower, which is basically a bed and a desk and like a rug, and like a little wash basin. And Egwene's sitting there juggling balls of light made of saidar. She's thinking to herself, she loves channeling, and it's honestly really hard to stop channeling. Like, she just wants to do it constantly, even though the Aes Sedai are warning her it's dangerous, and if you channel too much, if you take too much of the one power, you're gonna burn yourself out. And of course, that means stilling, losing the ability to channel forever, still able to touch the source, but not being able to touch it, which drives most people to suicide. Nynaeve is in the room, and she's just pacing back and forth, kind of angrily. She's just ignoring Min and Egwene, right? And they start talking about boys, and Egwene admits she thinks Galad is really good looking. Galad being Elaine's sister, right? And Min warns her, she's like, well, Galad's a good person, but I've seen, his fate, and he lacks compassion. And Min tells her Galad would hurt someone if he believed it would serve a greater good. So he's not bad, but he's always viewing things in black and white. Elaine bursts into the room and announces that King Galdrion is dead, the king of Karhine, who, we'd heard a little bit about that too. But there's a civil war in Karhine now as the great houses are fighting for who's going to take the throne. There's also war on Toman Head, and there's war in the city of Tyr over a false dragon that was caught. Also, there's some rumor that Arthur Hawkwing's armies have returned. Egwene also mentions she saw Logain, the previous false dragon who has been gentled, sitting around and crying in the tower courtyards. And she starts worrying about Rand being gentle. And she notes that one of the Aes Sedai, Anaya, thinks that she's a dreamer, someone who can tell the future in her dreams, and is trying to help her train to see if she can really unlock that talent, if she even really has it in the first place. So Elaine sees Nynaeve pacing back and forth angrily, and Min whispers to her, Nynaeve got in a fist fight with Arella, and she's just come back from Shiriam, the mistress of novices. But Nynaeve heard Min whispering this, and it makes her angry enough where she channels a burst of wind that knocks Min off her chair. Nynaeve realizes what she did in anger, because she's embarrassed, because if you go to Shiriam, everyone knows you were punished, which a lot of the times in this world means you were basically like either beaten or spanked, right? Like a child. And so that's basically what happened to Nynaeve. So she got mad that Min was talking about it, and Nynaeve, realizing what she did, she was offered to let Min turn her into Shiriam again, but Min forgives her, and they forgive each other, trying to be friends. And Elaine runs out, and she's like, okay, nobody saw, that's good. Nynaeve then channels her emotions over at Egwene, and says, I'm going to turn you in for channeling without the permission of an Aes Sedai. You're not supposed to, a novice isn't supposed to channel without the direction of an accepted or Aes Sedai. And Nynaeve says, I'm just worried that you're going to draw too much of the power and burn yourself to a crisp. And Elaine's like, well, the only thing that scares me is I have to wash dishes all the time. Elaine then looks over at Min and is like, can you do a viewing of us? And Min says no. She doesn't like to read the future of friends. But as she's looking at them, Min has a viewing and sees above their heads symbols that relate to each other, and sees it looks like we're all in very great danger. And that obviously worries everybody. Elaine, sensing the tension, tries to tell Min, you should just wear a cute little dress, and then you can attract Gawain's attention. And Min's like, nope, I like my coat and breeches. Breeches being, like, pants. So basically, Min doesn't like wearing dresses like the other girls do. She likes to wear... She's like a tomboy, right? So she's dressing sort of like a boy in this world. Anyway, boom! the door of their room bursts open, and Leandrin Sedai of the Red Ajah bursts into the room, right? Leandrin immediately orders Elaine and Min to leave the room. And Leandrin tells Egwene and Nynaeve that Rand, Mat, and Perrin are in danger, but they can help. And Leandrin kind of hints at the fact that she's been working with Moiraine because Moraine's concerned with those 3 boys. And she tells Nynaeve and Egwene, meet me this evening in the Ogier Grove nearby, and I'm going to take you to Toman Head. She then warns them, tell nobody about this. The Black Ajah are in the tower. The Black Ajah being an unacknowledged Ajah of the White Tower, Aes Sedai that serve the Dark One. No one acknowledges their existence. The Amyrlin certainly does not. And publicly, the White Tower denies that the Black Ajah even exists. But Leandrin tells them straight out that it does. And that scares the girls. They worry about the fact that Leandrin's a red, and so if she's gonna help, she still might not be on Rand's side. And they're a little concerned about Moiraine and Leandrin working together, but they're like, we have to go. Well, it turns out Elaine and Min were in the room next door, and they listened through a little hole in the wall. And so they came back in after Leandrin left, and were like, yeah, we're coming too. And Min's like, I have a viewing, and I have the sense that we could stick together. And Nynaeve is like, well, Elaine shouldn't come. And Min and... Or I'm sorry. She's like, Min shouldn't come. Elaine can because she can channel. But Elaine's like, she's linked to the boys just like us. She's part of the pattern. Like, we can't do anything about it. We have to go together, the 4 of us. And Egwene kind of laments the fact a little bit that when she tries to grasp saidar, she still, like, fails to grab it just as often as she succeeds. And so she's a little worried about that. But they all brave up, and they're like, all right, let's make plans to meet Leandrin and try to protect the boys. Chapter 39 is titled Flight from the White Tower. After some things that happen along the way, the girls make it to the Ogier Grove, and they find Leandrin, who's pretty mad that they brought Min and Elaine. And then Egwene and Nynaeve realize, oh, Leandrin wants to go through the ways. Leandrin opens up the gate by removing the little leaf, and Egwene rides her horse through, and she looks back when she passes through, and everyone looks like they're moving slower. Time moves slower in the ways, after all. Nynaeve comes in with the lantern, and Egwene's like, oh, thank goodness, we have light now, because it's very scary being in there alone with no light. Leandrin comes in last. She checks all the guidings, pulling out a piece of parchment so she can find her way, but she doesn't let Egwene or Nynaeve look at it. And they go out for a very long way, right? After a day of travel, an entire day in there, and Leandrin says it'll take 2 to get to Toman Head, Egwene asks Leandrin what are they going to do if they run into Machin Shin? And Leandrin's like, then I'll take care of it. It's not your place to talk about that or worry about that. The girls are gossiping at the camp, and Leandrin's off on her own, off to the side, not really wanting to be interacting with the 4 girls. And Min asks Egwene, how would Egwene feel if Rand chooses to marry Elaine or Min instead of her? And Egwene's like, I don't think I'll ever marry, but I wish good luck to anyone who ends up with Rand at this point. They go to sleep, and Leandrin wakes them in the quote-unquote morning, and for the next 2 more days, they ride until Leandrin announces they have arrived. Chapter 40 is titled Damane. 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 So we're going to have a few points of view. We're going to start out with Egwene's point of view. As they step out onto Toman Head out of the Waygate, Egwene notices a group of about 50 soldiers with armor on and these helmets that look like the heads of insects. She also sees a man with like a hooked nose and multiple women in these plain gray dresses wearing silver collars, and women in dresses that have forked lightning bolts on them, and also a noblewoman who's being carried in like a palanquin, which is like you have like the four dudes that have the things on their shoulders and they're carrying the rich person around. It's like that. And so Liandrin goes up to the people, and she's like, "This is Egwene, Nynaeve, and Elaine. I offer to you High Lady Sarath." And the hook-nosed man clasps a collar onto Egwene, one of those silver collars, and Egwene is immediately alarmed. This collar is like one piece, though it must have some kind of clasp, and she's reaching out and can't find any kind of clasp, and she tries to fight back and punches one of the women, and he's shocked when it feels like she herself has been punched right in the eye. And they're running around, and Nynaeve and Elaine scamper out as women are channeling, and they're sprinting away, and Min is dazed. She tried to use her knife on the man with the hooked nose, but was overcome by the soldiers. And Elaine can only sit there and do nothing. A woman introduces herself to Egwene as Renna, and says, "I am a Suldam. You are a Damain." And Egwene looks at the collar and sees it's attached to a leash, a silver chain. The collar is one piece, the same as the chain. There's no separate pieces here. It's all one. And they go to a bracelet that is being worn by this woman, Renna. All one piece. And Renna explains to Egwene, since you are a Damain, a leashed one, you must obey your Suldam completely. If you don't, and suddenly Egwene feels incredible pain, like 1,000 needles poking her in every single bit of her body, and it seems like it lasts an eternity, and it stops. Renna is demonstrating she can make Egwene feel this pain whenever she wants, as long as Egwene is collared. The High Lady Sarath expresses to Liandrin, who is standing there, that she is very upset that two of the girls escaped. But Liandrin mocks Sarath, basically, and makes mention that they both serve the same master. Sarath threatens to put a collar on Liandrin, and they just continue threatening each other for a while. But Liandrin says, "You better get Egwene and Nynaeve across the Aerith Ocean off of this continent soon." Sarath commands her men to stop hunting for Nynaeve, and Liandrin goes back into the ways. At this point, the man with the hook nose asks High Lady Sarath if he has permission to kill Min for punching him. Egwene starts yelling at them, "You can't do that," and feels incredible pain hit her for a second time as Renna punishes her through the leash. Sarath decides to spare Min's life in order to make Egwene more receptive to her new training and life as a Damain. Egwene asks Renna who Sarath and Liandrin's master is that they talked about, and Renna says, "The affairs of the blood are none of her business." Renna tells Egwene that normal punishments for Damain include losing their tongues or hands if they don't behave, since Damain don't need tongues or hands in order to channel. And Renna starts telling Egwene a story of Diane, an Aes Sedai from many years ago. See, Diane invented the collar, the Adam, and she explained there's no male Suldam. And Alwyn talks about how, most men don't feel anything when they try to put on the bracelet, but there are some who die screaming when they link with a Damain. And she starts telling the story of this Aes Sedai who created it, how it was done to control women after the breaking of the world, since Aes Sedai are nothing but animals, right? Women that can channel are nothing but animals, and they need to be completely controlled, or else their power will destroy the world. And Diane created this in order to help that goal, and after she had created enough of them, she was collared herself and spent the rest of her life as a Damane. Unwillingly, of course, at first. Rena then ends the story and tells Egwene, "Channel and blow up that tree over there." And Egwene refuses, and again 1,000 needles pierce Egwene's skin. Min tries to help, but one of the other Damane punishes Min with the power indirectly there as well. And so Egwene does so. And Rena says, "I think you, Egwene, are going to be one of the best Damane I've ever had. I'll allow you to keep your name. Some don't allow it, but I'll let you keep your name for now. Because you are my pet." We switch to Nynaeve's view, and Nynaeve is kind of happy with herself that she used the one power to fight off some of the soldiers, but her rage at what happened has kind of died down, and so she's not able to channel anymore because she's blocked. She can only channel when she's angry. Elaine finds Nynaeve together, and so they realize they're both safe, but they agree to head to Falme, the most western point on Toman Head, to try to find Egwene and Min. Elaine wonders, how could Liandrin lie to us about Rand being in danger? Aes Sedai can't lie. But they leave this mystery for now, and they start to go west. Chapter 41 is titled Disagreements. We go to Rand's perspective, and he's annoyed that it's raining very hard. He wishes he wasn't soaked to the skin as they rode. Hurin can't find the trail of the Trollocs, and morale of their group is incredibly low after what happened. Varen doesn't even appear to be miserable, though, because she's so lost in thought, being of the Brown Ajah. Rand asks her if she can stop the rain, but she's like, even though there's some voice in his head that's like, you could probably do it yourself, Rand. And Varen admits, like, she could make it lessen, but she couldn't stop a storm this big. And even if I could, it would require so much of the one power, and any Aes Sedai within 10 miles would know that someone was channeling here. And then the Seanchan and their Damane would find them. See, they had stopped at a village a little bit before this chapter started that we didn't see, and the villagers told them about the Seanchan and the Damane and the monsters that are with them. And the fact that Aes Sedai were leashed frightened those villagers even more than those strange creatures. There was a large burnt patch in the middle of that village, and Hurin refused to go near it, saying that something horrendous had happened there. Ingtar speaks up, lamenting the fact that this is a complete waste of time. We're never going to find the Horn of Valir just going village to village. It could be anywhere by now. But Rand and Varen stay true, and they're like, no, Fain is in Toman Head because he said he would be in Toman Head. And we know he wants, basically, they didn't say this out loud, but they're like, we know he wants Rand there. So clearly he's going to wait for Rand there. Rand is getting this urge, and he tells Varen, there's something pulling me to Falme, Falme being the city in Toman Head. Like, there isn't much time left, and I have to be there. But he goes into his bedroom in an inn that they're in the town and falls asleep, and while he's there, Baalzamon again shows with his eyes of fire, holding the dragon's banner. He calls out to Rand and says, Lews Therin, you are set to a course you cannot change, one of madness and death. Will you earn the name Kinslayer yourself in this life before you die, just like your last? Rand denies to the Baalzamon that he is the dragon, but Baalzamon says, I know you too well. I have faced you 1,000 times. You will serve as you have before. Or Rand says, I'll die before I'll serve the shadow. And Baalzamon says, you will die and have done so again and again throughout the spinning of the wheel. But this time, the wheel will stop spinning. The shadow will rule. And do you choose death or life and power? Rand, in the dream, seizes Sidon and channels the one power at Baalzamon, but it disappears into a black mist. He drinks in more and more of Sidon while Baalzamon says, you will destroy yourself. But Rand thinks of what he still has to do and says, I can't die yet, and he releases Sidon. Baalzamon gives him back the banner, but warns him, the wheel itself holds you prisoner to your fate age after age. I alone can free you and teach you how to use the power. Rand refuses him again, and Rand wakes. So that's the end of that chapter, and I just want to point out the pull that Rand feels is heavily implied at this point to be his ta'veren nature, the pattern forcing things into a certain route, and Rand feels this unexplicable, unreasonable urge that he has to make this decision, and so he does so. Anyway, chapter 42 is titled Falm. We follow to Nynaeve and Elaine, who are in an alleyway in Falm. It seems they've made it, and there's a Suldam and a Damane passing, but they don't let the pair get close. They keep their distance, so that the Suldam and Damane won't be able to sense that Nynaeve and Elaine can channel. Nynaeve looks at them and is just, to her stomach, sickened by the sight of the leash and the Adam. She can't imagine doing that to any woman. Well, except maybe Liandrin at this point, because Liandrin is clearly the Black Ajah. She sees a man out of the corner of her eye that looks like Paden Fane, but she quickly dismisses that thought because that would be absurd for that man to be here. Elaine comes over to Nynaeve again with some apples, and Nynaeve whispers angrily, "Did you steal those? Did you channel to steal those?" And panic in her voice. And Elaine is like, "Only a little bit, and I checked to make sure no one was watching. I looked carefully, and there were no Damane close." They are very concerned about the Damane finding them, because if they are found, both of them will also be collared. Elaine complains, "You've channeled right in front of a Damane," and they think about this time before the chapter started. Nynaeve channeled the Adam collar open on a Damane. But even though the Damane are treated like animals, strangely, it had been the woman in the collar who raised the alarm and pointed at them, causing Nynaeve and Elaine to flee. Strange. And Nynaeve thinks to herself, well, at the very least, being able to open that collar doesn't do any good unless we can find and reach Egwene. And they think they know where she is. They found the building that houses the Damane and see them go in and out all the time. And so they're watching, but Egwene has never come in or out that they know of. And so they continue to watch. Then we swap over to Egwene's point of view. So this is a very short bit of reading, but it is incredibly important for the entire rest of the series, the rest of this chapter, for Egwene's development. It is very disturbing, to be honest with you. It really bothers me. But I'm going to read this part straight from the book. This is going to be one of the very few times where I just read. I haven't done that since that beginning of book 1, if you remember. But I just want you to think, this chapter informs so many of the decisions that Egwene makes throughout the rest of the books. And that's why we're going to focus on it. It's only a few pages, but... Alright. From the narrow window of her tiny room under the eaves, one of a number roughly walled together from whatever had been there before, Egwene could see the garden where Damane were being walked by their Suldam. It had been several gardens before the Shanshan knocked down the walls that separated them and took the big houses to keep their domain. The trees were all but leafless, but the domain were still taken out for air whether they wanted it or not. Egwene watched the garden because Rena was down there, talking with another Soldam, and as long as she could see Rena, then Rena was not going to enter and surprise her. Some other Soldam might come. There were many more Soldam than there were Damain, and every Soldam wanted her turn wearing a bracelet. They called it being complete, but Rena still had charge of her training, and it was Rena who wore her bracelet 4 times out of 5. If anyone came, they would find no impediment to entering. There were no locks on the doors of Damain's rooms. Egwene's room only held a hard, narrow bed, a washstand with a chipped pitcher and bowl, 1 chair and a small table, but it had no room for more. Damain had no need for comfort or privacy or possessions. Damain were possessions. Min had a room just like this in another house, but Min could come and go as she would, or almost as she would. Shanshan were great ones for rules. They had more for everyone than the White Tower did for novices. Egwene stood far back from the window. She did not want any of the women below to look up and see the glow that she knew surrounded her as she channeled the one power, probing delicately at the collar around her neck, searching futilely. She could not even tell whether the band was woven or made of links. Sometimes it seemed one, sometimes the other, but it seemed all of a piece all the time. It was only a tiny trickle of the power, the merest drip that she could imagine, but it still beaded sweat on her face and made her stomach clench. That was one of the properties of the Yadam. If a Damain tried to channel without a Soldam wearing her bracelet, she felt sick, and the more of the power she channeled, the sicker she became. Lighting a candle beyond the reach of her arm would have made Egwene vomit. Once, Rena had ordered her to juggle her tiny balls of light with the bracelet lying on the table. Remembering still made her shudder. Now the silver leash snaked across the bare floor and up the unpainted wooden wall to where the bracelet hung on a peg. The sight of it hanging there made her jaws clench with fury. A dog leashed so carelessly could have run away. If a Damain moved her bracelet as much as a foot from where it had last been touched by a Soldam, well, Rena had made her do that too, had made her carry her own bracelet across the room, or try to. She was sure it had only been minutes before the Soldam snapped the bracelet firmly on her own wrist, but to Egwene the screaming and the cramps that had her writhing on the floor had seemed to go on for hours. Someone tapped at the door, and Egwene jumped before she realized it could not be a Soldam. None of them would knock first. She let Saidar go anyway, and she was beginning to feel decidedly ill. Min? Here I am for my weekly visit, Min announced as she slipped inside and shut the door. Her cheeriness sounded a little forced, but she always did what she could to keep Egwene's spirits up. How do you like it? She spun in a little circle, showing off her dark green wool dress of Shanshan cut. A heavy matching cloak hung over her arm. There was even a green ribbon catching up her dark hair, though her hair was hardly long enough for it. Her knife was still in its sheath at her waist, though. Egwene had been surprised when Min first showed up wearing it, but it seemed the Shanshan trusted everyone, until they broke a rule. It's pretty, Egwene said cautiously, but why? I haven't gone over to the enemy, if that's what you're thinking. It was this, or else find some place to stay out in the town, and maybe not be able to visit you again. She started to straddle the chair as she would have if she were in breeches, gave a wry shake of her head, and turned around to sit. Everyone has a place in the pattern, she mimicked, and the place of everyone must be readily apparent. That old hag Mullane apparently got tired of not knowing what my place was on sight and decided I ranked with the serving girls. She gave me a choice. You should see some of the things Shanshan's serving girls wear, the ones who serve the lords. It might be fun, but not unless I was betrothed, or better yet, married. Well, there's no going back. Not yet, anyway. Mullane burned my cloak and breeches. Grimacing to show what she thought of that, she picked up a rock from a small pile on the table and bounced it from hand to hand. "It isn't so bad," she said with a laugh, "except that it has been so long since I wore skirts that I keep tripping over them." Egwene had had to watch her clothes being burned too, including that lovely green silk she was wearing. It had made her glad she had not brought more of the clothes that Lady Amalisa had given her, though she might never see any of them, or the White Tower, again. What she had on now was the same dark gray all Damain wore. Damain have no possessions, it had been explained to her. The dress a Damain wears, the food she eats, the bed she sleeps in, are all gifts from her Sul'dam. If a Sul'dam chooses that a Damain sleep on the floor instead of in a bed, or in a stall, in a stable, it is purely the choice of the Sul'dam. Moulaine, who had charge of the Damain quarters, had a droning nasal voice, but she was sharp with any Damain who did not remember every word of her boring lectures. "I don't think there will be any going back for me ever," Egwene said, sighing, sinking down on her bed. She gestured to the rocks on the table. "Rena gave me a test yesterday. I picked out the piece of iron ore and the copper ore blindfolded every time she mixed them up. She left them all here to remind me of my success. She seemed to think it was some kind of reward to be reminded." "It doesn't seem any worse than the rest," Min said. "Not nearly as bad as making things explode like fireworks. But couldn't you have lied? Told her you didn't know which was which?" You still do not know what this is like." Egwene tugged at the collar. Pulling did no more good than channeling had. "When Rena is wearing that bracelet, she knows what I am doing with the power and what I am not. Sometimes she even seems to know when she isn't wearing it. She says Sul'dam develop an affinity, she calls it, after a while." Egwene sighed. "No one even thought to test me on this earlier. Earth is one of the 5 powers that was strongest in men. When I picked out those rocks, she took me outside the town, and I was able to point right to an abandoned iron mine. It was all overgrown, and there wasn't any opening to be seen at all, but once I knew how, I could feel the iron ore still in the ground. There hasn't been enough to make it worth working in 100 years, but I knew it was there. I couldn't lie to her, Min. She knew I had sensed the mine as soon as I did. She was so excited, she promised me a pudding with my supper." She felt her cheeks growing hot in anger and embarrassment. "Apparently," she said bitterly, "I am now too valuable to be wasted making things explode. Any Damain can do that. Only a handful can find ores in the ground." "Light, I hate making things explode, but I wish that was all I could do." The color in her cheeks deepened. She did hate it, making trees tear themselves to splinters and the earth erupt. That was meant for battle, for killing, and she wanted no part of it. Yet anything the Seanchan let her do was another chance to touch Saidar, to feel the power flowing through her. She hated the things Rena and the other Sul'dam made her do, but she was sure that she could handle much more of the power now than she could before leaving Tar Valon. She certainly knew she could do things with it that no sister in the tower had ever thought of doing. They never thought of tearing the earth apart to kill men. "Perhaps you won't have to worry about any of it much longer," Min said, grinning. "I found us a ship, Egwene. The captain has been held here by the Seanchan, and he's ready to sail with or without permission." "If he will take you, Min, go with him," Egwene said wearily. "I told you I'm valuable now. Rena says in a few days they're sending a ship back to Seanchan, just to take me." Min's grin vanished, and they stared at each other. Suddenly, Min hurled her rock at the pile on the table, scattering them. "There has to be a way out of here! There has to be a way to take that bloody thing off your neck!" Egwene leaned her head back against the wall. "You know the Seanchan have collected every woman they've been able to find who can channel even a speck. They come from all over, not just from here in Falme, but from the fishing villages and from farming towns inland. Tarabonner and Domani women, passengers off ships they've stopped. There are 2 Aes Sedai among them. Aes Sedai! Min exclaimed. By habit, she looked around to make sure no Seanchan had overheard her saying that name. Egwene, if there are Aes Sedai here, they can help us. Let me talk to them and... They can't even help themselves, Min. I only talked to one. Her name is Rima. The Suldam don't call her that, but that's her name. She wanted to make sure I knew it, and she told me there is another. She told me in between bouts of tears. She's Aes Sedai, and she was crying, Min. She has a collar on her neck. They make her answer to Pura, and she can't do anything more about it than I can. They captured her when Falme fell. She was crying because she's beginning to stop fighting against it, because she cannot take being punished anymore. She was crying because she wants to take her own life, and she cannot even do that without permission. Light, I know how she feels. Min shifted uneasily, smoothing her dress with suddenly nervous hands. Egwene, you don't want to... Egwene, you must not think of harming yourself. I will get you out somehow. I will. I'm not going to kill myself, Egwene said dryly, even if I could. Let me have your knife. Come on, I won't hurt myself. Just hand it to me. Min hesitated before slowly taking her knife from its sheath at her waist. She held it out warily, obviously ready to leap if Egwene tried anything. Egwene took a deep breath and reached for the hilt. A soft quiver ran through the muscles of her arm. As her hand came within a foot of the knife, a cramp suddenly contorted her fingers. Eyes fixed, she tried to force her hand closer. The cramp seized her whole arm, knotting muscles to her shoulder. With a groan, she sank back, rubbing her arm and concentrating her thoughts on not touching the knife. Slowly, the pain began to lessen. Min stared at her incredulously. What? I don't understand. And Egwene said, Damain are not allowed to touch a weapon of any kind. She worked her arm, feeling the tightness go. Even our meat is cut for us. I don't want to hurt myself, but I could not if I did want to. No Damain is ever left alone where she might jump from a height. That window over there is nailed shut. Or throw herself in a river. Well, that's a good thing. I mean, I don't know what I mean. If you could jump in a river, you might escape. Egwene went on dully, as if the other woman had not spoken. They are training me, Min. The Suldam and the Adam are training me. I cannot touch anything I even think of as a weapon. A few weeks ago, I considered hitting Rena over the head with that pitcher, and I could not pour wash water for 3 days. Once I'd thought of it that way, I not only had to stop thinking about hitting her with it, I had to convince myself I would never, under any circumstances, hit her with it before I could touch it again. She knew what had happened, told me what I had to do. It would not let me wash anywhere except with that pitcher and bowl. You are lucky it happened between your visiting days. Rena made sure I spent those days sweating from the time I woke to the time I fell asleep, exhausted. I am trying to fight them, but they are training me as surely as they're training Pura. She clapped a hand to her mouth, moaning through her teeth. Oh, her name is Rima. I have to remember her name, not the name they put on her. She is Rima, and she's Yellow Ajah, and she has fought them as long and as hard as she could. It is no fault of hers that she hasn't the strength left to fight any longer. I wish I knew who the other sister is that Rima mentioned. I wish I knew her name. Remember both of us, Min. Rima of the Yellow Ajah and Egwene al'Vere, not Egwene the Damain, Egwene al'Vere of Emond's Field. Will you do that? Stop it! Min snapped. Stop it right this instant. If you get shipped off to Seanchan, I'll be right there with you. But I don't think you will. You know I've read you, Egwene. I don't understand most of it. I almost never do. But I see things I am sure link you to Rand and Perrin and Mat, and yes, even Galad. Light help you for a fool. How can any of that happen if the Seanchan take you off across the ocean? Maybe they are going to conquer the whole world, Min. If they conquer the world, there's no reason Rand and Galad and the rest could not end up in Seanchan. You ninny-headed goose! I'm being practical, Egwene said sharply. I don't intend to stop fighting, not as long as I can breathe, but I don't see any hope that I'll ever have the Adam off me, either. Just as I don't see any hope that anyone is going to stop the Seanchan. Min, if this ship captain will take you, go with him. At least then one of us will be free. The door swung open and Rena stepped in. Egwene jumped to her feet and bowed sharply, as did Min. The tiny room was crowded for bowing, but Seanchan insisted on protocol before comfort. Your visiting day, is it? Rena said. I had forgotten. Well, there's training to be done even on visiting days. Egwene watched sharply as the Suldam took down the bracelet, opened it, and fastened it again around her wrist. She could not see how it was done. If she could have probed with the one power, she would have, but Rena would have known that immediately. As the bracelet closed around Rena's wrist, a look came onto the Suldam's face that made Egwene's heart sink. You have been channeling. Rena's voice was deceptively mild. There was a spark of anger in her eyes. You know that is forbidden except when we are complete. Egwene wet her lips. Perhaps I have been too lenient with you. Perhaps you believe that because you are valuable now, you will be allowed license. I think I made a mistake letting you keep your old name. I had a kitten called Tuli when I was a child. From now on, your name is Tuli. You will go now, Min. Your visiting day with Tuli is ended. Min hesitated only long enough for one anguished look at Egwene before leaving. Nothing Min could say or do would do anything except make matters worse, but Egwene could not help looking longingly at the door as it closed behind her friend. Rena took the chair, frowning at Egwene. I must punish you severely for this. We will both be called to the court of the 9 moons. You for what you can do, I as your Suldam and trainer, and I will not allow you to disgrace me in the eyes of the Empress. I will stop when you tell me how much you love being Damain and how obedient you will be after this. And Tuli, make me believe every word. That's the end of that chapter. Alright, wife, we're getting into the end game for this book now. There's only a few chapters left, So, chapter 43 is titled, A Plan. Min walks out of the building where Egwene and the other Damain are kept, and she hears Egwene's shrieks of pain. Min's not used to being so helpless, so useless. Shaking and crying, she runs away from the building in an attempt to get away from the screams, only to run into Elayne and Nynaeve, who are watching the building. When they see Min is crying, they guess something's happening to Egwene, but Min lies and says she's as well as could be expected. Min fears that if she tells the truth, Nynaeve's going to do something stupid and end up being collared herself. Min explains to them that she found a ship captain who will take all of them away from Falme. And Nynaeve's like, that sounds like a good idea. Nynaeve's like, so how are we going to pay for it? Min's like, I never got that far. She's like, well, the captain wants to leave really badly, but because there are so many ships patrolling the harbor and you never know which of those ships have Damain in them, it's very risky to try. But they're going to take Egwene to Seanchan soon, so we have to go soon. As they start walking to the dock to talk to the ship captain, Min sees 2 auras around Nynaeve, one around Nynaeve and one around Elayne. There's a ring of heavy gold floating above Nynaeve's head, and above Elayne, a red-hot iron and an axe. These auras that Min is seeing convey a sense of danger for them, but what kind of danger, Min has no idea. As they approach the ship captain, where they knew the ship captain was, it turns out this ship captain is Bayle Domon, who has never met these girls before. He helped Rand and Mat and Tom in the first book, and then he's been kind of held here after his ship got taken, right? We heard from him in the earlier chapters. They try to convince him to leave, and he's like, but the Domain will rip my ship to splinters. And Nynaeve says, you'll sail with something better than Domain. And she pulls a cord out from underneath her dress that has 2 rings on it, like a necklace. Min recognizes one of them. It's Lan's ring. And it's the same one as in Nynaeve's aura that she saw earlier. But Dolmen recognizes only the other ring, the ring of the Aes Sedai, the serpent. Dolmen admits there do be a chance we may escape, but he warns her and tells her to put it away quickly and warns her the consequences of showing that ring if anyone sees it. Dolmen says an Aes Sedai and a warder came to Falme after the Seanchan took over, but the Seanchan ambushed her. 6 Domain shielded the Aes Sedai from the power. And one of those Domain, it sounds like, according to Min, was Rima of the Yellow Ajah, who was forced to betray her own sister. But Nynaeve is not discouraged and says, we're going to sail soon, and if you don't agree to take us now, we're going to find someone else, and you won't have the protection of 3 women who can channel. And so they go back to the room, and he agrees, and they're like, we will let you know, but you need to be ready to sail the second we come up to you. And so they start planning on how to free Egwene. Alright, chapter 44 is titled 5 Will Ride Forth. As Perrin, Hurin, and Mat are riding in a village, because they don't want to go into villages with their whole group, right? So they just send a few people. They find Fane's trail, because according to Hurin, Fane's trail makes a Myrddraal smell like roses. And they find the Children of the Light are riding into this town. And so, that's instead of the Seanchan. And so Perrin reaches out to the wolves and introduces himself. And the wolves move towards the village and as they're leaving, and they assure Perrin, like, nope, no humans are following you. We can check, or we checked. Then it shifts to the point of view of Geofram Bornhald. Bornhald is in the town, and he looks at the men riding out of the village and recognizes Perrin, but he's got other things to worry about, and so he orders the children, the children being the Children of the Light, to lock all the villagers in the inn with food and water, which will help prevent the Seanchan from finding them, he says. And, they need all the advantages they can get, too, because Aes Sedai are clearly on the Seanchan's side, since the Seanchan have fight using the one power, which is not typical of the Aes Sedai, but it looks like the Aes Sedai have shown their true colors, he thinks. He orders Child Byar, or however I pronounced it, to watch the battle that's about to take place from a distance and carry word to his son of what happens. After that, Byar is told to go tell the commander of the Children of the Light about the Seanchan and the Aes Sedai. The point of view shifts to Rand, and as Hurin, Mat, and Perrin come back in, everyone starts worrying whether they were caught because they know about the Children of the Light. Ingtar thinks the White Cloaks might actually distract the Seanchan and, fight each other instead of worrying about them. And Varen explains that the weeks it took them to get to Falme probably actually helped them, because, after all, the pattern puts everything in its place precisely. Ingtar says he's going to take Hurin and some of his soldiers to go into the city, get the horn, and get the dagger. And Mat, Rand, and Perrin are like, we're going too. And he's like, nope, the Seanchan are definitely going to notice like 20 soldiers. Loyal's like, I'm going to go. And Varen's like, nope, you're not going because there aren't any Ogier there, and you're going to attract as much attention as everyone else put together. And Varen's like, I can't go because the Domain will sense that I am a channeler. Varen is drawing on the ground a wheel with 4 spokes, and with one of the spokes being rubbed out. So there are 4 now, but there were 5. And remember the verse of the Corinthian cycle, the prophecies of the dragon. 5 ride forth, 4 return. Above the watchers shall he proclaim himself, bannered across the sky in fire. And so, knowing Varen somewhat insisting, you're not going with a bunch of soldiers, Loial can't go, I can't go, the people that are going are the boys, you, and Hurin, because only 5 people are going, so we don't arouse suspicion. But we know she's doing that because of the prophecies, the ones that Moraine learned about. Chapter 45 is titled Blade Master. Nynaeve, Elayne, and Min are waiting in an alley as they plot to free Egwene. It's early in the morning, so there's not a lot of people out, but they see Adamain and Suldam walking on the road. And Nynaeve starts saying to herself, leashed ones and leash holders, they put their filthy collar on Egwene's neck, and Min and them realize she's riling herself up so she can channel, and Nynaeve focuses her anger, holds saidar, and channels at the Adam, opening the collar. The Damain is obviously a local, not someone from Seanchan, because the Damain immediately turns around and punches the Suldam in the face and flees as quickly as she can. Nynaeve, Min, and Elayne drag the Suldam and the Adam into the alley into a shed. They take the bracelet of the Adam off of her wrist and take off her dress and her boots. And they start to try to take the place of them. So Nynaeve puts on the clothes of the Suldam, the lightning bolt dress, and Elayne starts to put on a gray dress very similar to the Damain's. Elayne wishes out loud she knew more of what the Adam did, because clearly the intention is for Elayne to wear it and pretend that she's a Damain and Nynaeve is the Suldam. But Nynaeve says, well, there is one way to find out, and while she wears the bracelet of the Adam, she snaps it around the neck of the Suldam. And as she does so, she is immediately aware of everything the Suldam is feeling. The Suldam laughs at her, and Nynaeve has this idea, and in her mind she adds a sensation to the lump of sensations she knows belong to the Suldam. The sensation she added is pain. The Suldam is in quick pain, curling up on herself, despite the fact that Min is saying it wouldn't work on anyone who can't channel. Nynaeve stops immediately when she realizes what's happening, but the Suldam is terrified and agrees, I will answer any questions you have, just please take this off me. And Nynaeve comes to a realization. She could never make Elayne wear that collar. And so she comes to a decision. The Suldam will be the fake Damain, and Elayne will just come as a servant. After all, nobody really looks at a Damain, so they should work. And the woman is terrified. Like, I can't go out there wearing this. I can't. And Nynaeve says, well, then you had best help us and make sure that nobody notices our Damain, or us. The perspective shifts back to Baal Doman, and he's on the boat with his crew, watching for the woman to show up. His crewmate is like, we should leave, and he's like, I'm not leaving until those women are aboard, unless the Seanchan shoulders come for my ship right now. And then the perspective shifts again over to Rand. He leaves the dragon banner in his saddlebags at the stable that they go in, because they stable their horses. They try to find Paden Fane's trail, but he's been everywhere in the city, and it's really hard to follow. As they're walking, Rand and Hurin recognize the Seanchan walking with Gralm, those creatures from the portal worlds, and they deliberately avert their eyes so they aren't, no one thinks them suspicious. Finally, they come across the High Lord Turok's house, and Hurin explains that this street stinks layer upon layer of Paden Fane, and Mat, being close enough now, realizes he can sense the dagger in the house. They go around the back, because Ingtar says they're less likely to guard the back of the house, because they're so busy guarding actual gates, and they hop over the wall. Matt leads them, following the pull, like the invisible pull of the dagger, and leads them to an empty room, and they see the Horn of Valere and the dagger. Matt quickly picks up the dagger, and Ingtar says, "By light, it is the horn. I'm saved." Because Ingtar knows he couldn't go back without that horn back to his home. Rand looks down at the window and thinks he sees Egwene in the domain quarters, but everyone else is like, that couldn't have been her. She's in Tar Valon. Before Rand can say anything, the door opens again, and they are interrupted by Lord Turok and several Seanchan soldiers. Turok says he suspected the whole time that Paden Fain would try to steal the horn, because he's been suspicious of Fain ever since his Turok's assistant died. But because you are here instead, I will kill you. A soldier tries to take the horn from Matt, but Matt stabs him with the dagger, and suddenly, where Matt stabbed with the dagger, blackness spreads quickly through the man's veins and on his skin, and he screams in extreme agony, with his entire body turning pitch black as he writhes on the floor. And they learn if anyone gets even the slightest scratch from this dagger, that will happen to them. The man is dead. Ingtar and the others fight the soldiers, while Rand takes on Lord Turok. And he notices when Turok pulls out his sword, there is a heron on the blade. Turok is a blade master, one that is actually recognized, not just a farm boy or a shepherd that happens to have the sword. Rand fights him, and it is a very difficult battle, but eventually, and skipping all the drama of it, he triumphs, and tries not to call on to Sidon during the fight, because he knows if he doesn't have the full attention dedicated to Sidon, it will overwhelm and consume him, so he mustn't reach out for it when he's distracted by the fight. As soon as the others realize Turok is killed, the servants that are with him stab themselves and say, "From birth to death, I serve the blood," and they die. As they leave, Rand says, "I have to save Egwene. I know it was her." And he runs out of the building, and Matt has the horn and the dagger, and they run past multiple Seanchan and realize there's too many. We have to leave. And so Rand spares one last thought for Egwene and says, "I will come back to her somehow." Chapter 46 is titled, "To Come Out of the Shadow." The perspective shifts to Nynaeve, who is dressed as a Suldam, leading Seta, the previous Suldam, who is now dressed as a Damain. They go into the fourth floor, passing multiple Damain and Suldam who don't recognize anyone, and the hair over Seta's face covering her as she looks towards the floor, praying to herself that no one dares recognize that she is leashed at the moment. Min leads him into Egwene's room, and Egwene looks up and immediately says, "Oh no, you are all beautiful, the most beautiful things I've ever seen." Nynaeve channels, freeing Egwene from the collar, and Egwene immediately takes off the gray dress and puts on Nynaeve's old dress, explaining to the others quickly how the Adam works. Nynaeve removes the bracelet and puts it on a peg, leaving Seta chained in the room. Seta begs them to be free, saying she won't say a word about them here. And Egwene shares a theory. Suldam, like the Adam don't work on people that channel, or that can't channel, right? Which means Suldam are women who can learn to channel. And this mortifies Seta, because apparently the Seanchan don't realize that there is a difference between women who are born with the ability to channel and women who can learn to channel. Egwene and Nynaeve and Elaine are the former. They are women who are born with the innate ability to channel, but the Suldam are those that can be taught. And apparently the Adam works both ways. Rena enters the room at this exact moment and thinks Nynaeve must be a Suldam there to link with Egwene, and says, "What is going on here? An audience? I never gave permission for anyone else to link with my pet Tuli." Then she looks over at Egwene and sees she no longer has the Adam on her neck. Egwene throws the water pitcher at her and leashes her with her old Adam. She then tries to strangle Rena with her hands, and Nynaeve stops her as Egwene collapses and cries onto her shoulder, saying, "You don't know what they did to me." As they prepare to leave the Dalmane quarters, they leave Seta and Rena in the room with the leashes pegged on the pegs on the wall, leashed. As they exit, they see a bunch of Seanchan soldiers coming. Egwene, immediately fearing that they're going to put the leash back on her, channels the power as Nynaeve yells, "Don't!" And suddenly the streets begin to erupt with earth shattering everywhere. Someone tries to throw balls of fire at them, and Nynaeve in her anger attacks back, throwing lightning from the sky. The perspective shifts back to Bail Domon. Bail Domon is on his ship waiting. The crew tries to set sail, but Domon stops them and says, "My ship stay until I say they sail." The crew tries to convince him, but he insists still on staying for them and says, "Hurry, woman, Aes Sedai or whatever you be, hurry." The perspective shifts again to Geofram Bornhald. Bornhald watches lightning flying from the sky from outside the city, and he then advances his entire legion of the Children of the Light towards the city. The perspective shifts again back to Rand. Rand and Ingtar trying to hide from the Seanchan. So many soldiers coming close. Rand worrying how are they going to get out, worrying about Egwene. Ingtar worrying about how they're going to defend themselves. And then Ingtar starts speaking. "I never knew what he was going to do," he says. "A pale little man. You didn't really seem to notice even when you were looking at him. Take him inside Fal Dara, I was told, inside the fortress. I did not want to, but I had to do it, you understand? I had to. I never knew what he intended until he shot that arrow. I still don't know if it was meant for the Amyrlin or you." Rand, suddenly worried at Ingtar's words, looks over at him, but Ingtar keeps speaking. "Humankind is being swept away everywhere. Nations fail and vanish. Dark friends are everywhere, and none of these Southlanders seem to notice or care. We fight to hold the borderlands, to keep them safe in their houses, and every year, despite all we can do, the blight advances. And these Southlanders think Trollocs are just myth, that a Myrddraal is a gleeman's tale. It seemed the only way. We would be destroyed for nothing, defending people who don't even know or care. It seemed logical. Why should we be destroyed for them when we can make our own peace? Better the shadow, I thought, than useless oblivion. It seemed so logical then." And Rand comes across the realization. Ingtar is a dark friend. Ingtar is the one that allowed Paden Fain to escape. Ingtar is the one that likely stopped Rand from leaving. Ingtar is the one that had the gates open so Paden Fain could escape. And because of Ingtar, that arrow almost killed him or the Amyrlin. But Ingtar expresses to Rand then, "I want to walk in the light." And Hurin suddenly comes up to them, saying it's safe to continue. And Ingtar just tells Rand, "Go, take the horn where it belongs. I'm going to defend this gate and defend your back." And Rand agrees and says, "The light shine on you, Lord Ingtar of House Shnoa, and may you shelter in the palm of the Creator's hand. The last embrace of the Mother welcome you home." Because Rand realizes no man has ever been turned to the dark so long it's impossible for him to come back. Chapter 47 is titled, "The Grave is no bar to my call," which are the words on the horn, if you recall. The perspective is Rand's. Rand and Hurin meet with Mat, Perrin, and the others. They ask where Ingtar is, but he says he's fighting so they can get away. And Rand thinks to himself, Ingtar was a dark friend, but I don't care. He was still my friend. Rand tells Mat and Perrin and the others, take the horn to Verin. I'm going to go rescue Egwene. And Mat's like, we'll all take the horn, then we'll rescue Egwene. And while they're arguing, Shan-Chan soldiers approach them from one side of the street, white cloaks from the other. And they don't see any way to get out alive. And Mat says, well, it has to be at the last battle. Nothing says it can't be used before then. And he looks at them. Nothing says it can't. And he blows the horn of Valir. The perspective shifts to Geofram Bornhald. Bornhald hears a horn sounding, and a mist begins to rise over the land, and he thinks of the Shan-Chan and thinks the Shan-Chan are trying something. They know we're here, and he orders his legion to charge forward. And as they meet against the Shan-Chan, he is killed. Rand's point of view it goes to. The fog around them is growing thicker, but Rand can see. He can see, but something was wrong. It's madness. Falm is floating many, many feet beneath him. He's in the sky. He can see the border of the city hitting the Shan-Chan ranks. Lightning rippling in the street. Falm below. And the White Cloaks charging and dying as the earth opens beneath them in fire, as the Domain channel at the White Cloaks. Men running around the ships. One ship, a fearful man waiting, that Rand seems like he feels like he could recognize the face of the captain. It's Bael Doman, waiting there for some reason. And then figures come out of the mist. Rogash Eagle-Eye, Gadel Kane, Birgitte, Mikkel, Paedrig, Oterin, many others, and at their head of these figures coming out of the mist, seemingly from nowhere, Artur Hawkwing. There's roughly 100 of them. And Artur Hawkwing, now seeing Rand, because, even though he was, floating beneath him, they're talking through the fog, and Artur Hawkwing tells Rand, we can't follow you if not everything's in place. Where is it? Where's the banner? And upon mentioning it, Rand goes into his saddlebags and rips out the dragon banner and holds it up. And now Artur Hawkwing says, the pattern weaves itself around our necks like halters. You are here, the banner is here, the weave of this moment is set. We have come to the horn, but we must follow the banner and the dragon. Perrin puts the banner onto a sapling, so it's, being held up very high, and Mat blows the horn again, Perrin carrying the banner, and they ride forward. And suddenly, everything around Rand changes. He can see his friends and the heroes of the horn, but only as he was able to see Falm a moment ago. They seem far below him. He rides on alone through this mist. So he's riding on mist in the sky, basically. And he comes across Baalzamon. He is thrown from his horse, and when he gets back to his feet, Baalzamon is still there. Rand can still see all of his friends, Artur Hawkwing and the other heroes of the Horn, fighting the Shan-Chan in the fog, Perrin swinging his axe, Mat blowing the horn of Valir again, Hurin fighting on the ground. Rand steps forward, envelops his mind into the void, and reaches for Sidon. Baalzamon starts taunting him about Egwene, the Dark One, the Horn of Valir, and seems to think it was Rand who sounded it. It seems to Rand that Baalzamon doesn't know everything. Rand attacks Baalzamon and they fight. And as they fight, Baalzamon continues to taunt Rand. Rand can see the battle between his friends below, and he realizes their battles are linked. Whenever Rand presses the attack against Baalzamon, the heroes of the Horn press the attack against the Shan-Chan. But whenever he's on the defensive and falls back, the Shan-Chan rise up and start fighting harder as well. Baalzamon again tries to convince Rand that Baalzamon is the only one that can save him, and Rand realizes what he must do. Baalzamon is too skilled a blade master for Rand to fight on his own, and so he assumes the first position. heron waiting in the rushes. It leaves him completely exposed to an attack. It's a purely offensive move with no defense. No, just all openings. And he says, "I will never serve you, father of lies. In 1,000 lives I never have. I know that. I'm sure of it. Come, it's time to die." Baalzamon attacks, stabbing with his staff as if it's a spear. It pierces into Rand's side, and Rand screams before driving his sword straight into Baalzamon's heart. Chapter 48 is titled First Claiming. We swap to Min's point of view. Min is searching for Elaine, Egwene, and Nynaeve as they separated in that battle. She sees Bridget Silverbow shooting an arrow at a Shan-Chan ship and thinks she also saw Arthur Hawkwing. She keeps going and finds Rand inside a garden, and he's unconscious. Min moves towards him and sees he's carrying a sword that's half melted, as if by fire, and it looks like it's still red hot. And she notices a heron on the hilt of the sword has branded itself onto Rand's palm. And so we see Rand now has 2 herons on his palm. She checks on his injuries and lifts his shirt and finds a wound on his side, totally cauterized, but his flesh feels as cold as ice. Min starts dragging Rand into a nearby building in a bedroom, puts him on the bed, and climbs under the blankets with him, trying to warm him with her body heat. While he's unconscious, she talks to him aloud about feelings she seems to have for him. Egwene comes in and finds the 2 of them, and Egwene tells Min, you know he can't marry. He isn't safe for any of us, Min. And Min just replies, "Speak for yourself. It's like Elaine said, you tossed him aside for the White Tower. What should you care if I pick him up?" Egwene's silent for a bit and then goes to find Nynaeve, and Min stays there and talks to Rand, unconscious, more. And she tells Rand, even though he can't hear, "This isn't your fault, but you will pay for it, I think. We're all caught like flies in a spider web. What if I told Egwene there's another woman yet to come, one she doesn't even know, that'll come for you? For that matter, what would you think of that, my fine Lord Shepherd? You aren't bad looking at all, but... Light, I don't even know if I'm the one you'll choose. I don't know if I want you to choose me. Or will you try to dandle all 3 of us on your knee? It might not be your fault, Rand al'Thor, but it isn't fair." And a voice speaks up. "Not Rand al'Thor. Lews Therin Telamon, the Dragon Reborn." And Min looks at the door and sees the most beautiful woman she's ever seen. Pale, smooth skin, long black hair, eyes as dark as the night, a dress so white it made snow look dirty with a silver belt. And Min felt herself bristle and says, "What do you mean? Who are you?" She walks over to Rand and Min. Such graceful movements. Min feels a envy, even though she's never envied any woman before. And the woman smooths Rand's hair as if Min's not even there and says, "He doesn't believe yet, I think. He knows, but he does not believe. I've guided his steps, pushed him, pulled him, enticed him. He was always stubborn, but this time I will shape him. Ishmael thinks he controls events, but I do." She touches Rand's forehead as if drawing a mark. And Min asks, "Who are you?" The woman looks at her and says, "I'm called Lanfear, girl." Min's mouth dries so quickly she couldn't have spoken a word if her entire life depended on it, and thinks to herself, "One of the Forsaken. No, Light, no." All she could do was shake her head. And Lanfear says, "Lews Therin was and is mine, girl. Tend him well for me until I come for him." And she was gone. Min just gaped at where she was. One moment she was there, and then, poof, she was just gone. Min realized she was hugging Rand's body very tightly, and wished to herself she really wished she didn't feel like she wanted Rand awake to protect her. If you didn't pick up on it, by the way, the revelation there is that Selene was Lanfear the whole time, because they have the exact same description. So it turns out Rand was traveling with one of the Forsaken, which explains a lot of how she knew certain things. The perspective shifts one more time to Child Bjar's point of view, and he's riding hard to relay the events of the battle to the commander, and thinks to himself Bornhold's death is the fault of Dark Friends. And the chapter ends. Chapter 49 is titled, What Was Meant to Be. Rand wakes up and sees Min with him and says, it turns out they're 5 days east of Falme. He's been asleep for 5 days. Rand asks about Egwene, and Min tells him that Egwene, Elaine, Nynaeve, Verin, Hurin, and Mat have all left for Tar Valon. But she tells him, there's something wrong with the wound on your side. It couldn't be healed properly. Rand looks at his side and feels wrong. Something about it is just wrong. Moraine comes in and they start talking about Paden Fain, and Rand tells him that he has killed Baalzamon. Moraine hands him a parchment with a drawing inside of it, and he opens it up and sees a drawing of a man whose face is solid flame, fighting with a staff against a man with a sword in the clouds where lightning crashes around them, and behind their bodies the dragon banner rippling. Moraine says that everyone knows. It turns out that Rand and Baalzamon's battle appeared to everyone in the sky. Everyone saw it. Moraine then pulls something else out. 2 broken discs, half black, half white, seals of the Dark One's prison. She found both of them in the High Lord Turek's house, and that means now, out of the 7, 3 of the seals to the Dark One's prison are broken. Rand looks over and sees his half-melted sword, causing him to think of Tam, because that was the sword that he got from Tam. But Min helps him walk, since Rand has a lot of trouble with it on his own. As they help him down, Rand sees Loyal, Perrin, Lan, and the Shenarans, and he also sees the dragon banner high in the camp, and asks why it's there when everyone can see it. And Moraine says, "It's too late to hide, Rand. It was always too late for you to hide." The Shenarans kneel, and then pledge themselves to the service of the Dragon Reborn, Rand. Chapter 50 is titled After, and I'm just going to read it because it's less than a page. By ship and horse the stories spread, by merchant wagon and man on foot, told and retold, changing, yet always alike at the heart, to Ered Doman and Terabon and beyond, of signs and portents in the sky above Falme. And men proclaimed themselves for the dragon, and other men struck them down and were struck down in turn. Other tales spread, of a column that rode from the sinking sun across Almith Plain. 100 bordermen, it was said. No, 1,000. No, 1,000 heroes come back from the grave to answer the call of the Horn of Valir. 10,000. They had destroyed a legion of the Children of the Light entirely. They had thrown Arthur Hawkwing's returned armies back into the sea. They were Arthur Hawkwing's armies returned. Towards the mountains they rode, towards the dawn. Yet, one thing every tale had the same. At their head rode a man whose face had been seen in the sky above Falme, and they rode under the banner of the Dragon Reborn. And then there is one extra paragraph that is separate from that and says, "And men cried out to the Creator, saying, O light of the heavens, light of the world, let the promised one be born of the mountain, according to the prophecies, as he was in ages past and will be in ages to come. Let the Prince of the morning sing to the land, that green things will grow, and the valleys give forth lambs. Let the arm of the Lord of the Dawn shelter us from the dark, and the great sword of justice defend us. Let the dragon ride again on the winds of time. And that is the end of The Great Hunt. One of my favorite books of all time. I really hope you liked it. It was really hard not to just read a lot more of it verbatim, I'm going to be honest, because holy crap, those last few chapters are amazingly written. Alright, well, that's book 2. On to book 3. And book 3 is titled The Dragon Reborn. Ooh. I'm out.